Welcome to the Kawartha Small Business Podcast, where we believe the Kawarthas can be the most thriving region in Canada for small businesses. I'm Brian Rump from Profit Coach.
And I'm Matt Garrity of Matty G Digital.
And we're recording from the Thrive Podcast Studio at Thrive Co-working Community at 18 Kent Street West in downtown Lindsay. And we are talking about starting strong. So we're right in 2023. And thought we would do a quick episode of how do we start the year strong? Because I think we go through New Year's resolution mode, we wrap up the year, typically businesses, even if we're really busy in sort of the Christmas season, we slow down our future thinking. It's a fun time of year. And then I hear conversations a lot of, in January, people are like, I really should plan more for the year. Mm-hmm. So, get back to, thinking about my business. We create new personal goals. So it's an optimistic time, but we're not always prepared to start it strong.
Speaking of unprepared, I thought we were talking about starting point. This whole time that we were sitting here upside down, I'm like, we're talking about starting point, and I'm like, thinking of some stuff to say, so this is somewhat better. And in typical prepared fashion, I think last year, we went to do our retreat in October, right? And we did a lot of cool stuff, talking about plans, and I've got that binder still of Post-its and all that kind of stuff. What I'm trying to get at is I'm not prepared this year, and I am guilty of what I may be critical of on this podcast, at least, is people that aren't planning. I'm that person this year. I think you're planned more than you think you are.
Sure. And I think you're ready to start strong. You might not have all the exact pieces together and as strong as we maybe would like. But that's also why we're talking about this. So how do we change that a little bit? So, I think, January can become sort of a planning month, but what we don't want to see, and I see it all the time, is January I'm going to, plan, and this year's going to be different. And then January happens, February happens, March happens, the spring gets busy. Then it's it's summer. And I think a lot of people just end up on these loops of I'll get to it soon, right? Or I gotta, I hear it all the time. Well, my next few weeks is busy, and then I'm going to have some time to do this. So that's always going to happen as a business owner. There's always something. So I think, there's some ways to kind of bust that cycle a bit and just find a way to start strong.
Time flies, and we're recording and talking about this, listening to this podcast in January, probably at the beginning of the year. In my head, I feel like it's the summer. We've already, it's 6 months into the year. I've already missed half of the year, just the way things fly so quickly. I would like to slow it down and start planning accordingly. And I think it's maybe different. You say, I'm very planned and I've got all this stuff because we do weekly check-ins and I text you nonsense all the time. But I do think it's valuable, again, to sit down, write the stuff down. Last year, I took it from a notebook and then I put it electronically into a document. And then I found the thing that helps me a lot is it's fine to have a goal, or whether it's lofty or not, but it might just be one thing. You're okay, I want to make X amount of revenue. And then you turn around at the end of the year, you're oh man, I'm not even close to that. Or I burned through that. Or how did I get to that point if I did hit that number? So what I did last year was I set up a bunch of milestones along the way. So, okay, if I want to make this amount of revenue or all these other goals or whatever, how do I get there? And I had a bunch of milestones, check, and they weren't even financial. It was I need to do this. It was all marketing stuff. Yeah. And I needed to do this part of marketing. I need to do that and all these different things. And that was super useful because I was able to task those out or put a due date on them. And frankly, some of them kept being pushed and moved and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the year, in the last month, like 30 days, I've been thinking like I didn't accomplish anything that I wanted. And I don't even know if that's true. I don't know what my revenue is. Maybe I should check better, closer to that. But I looked at the milestones and I like completed more than half of them. And I was like, that was actually like quite a bit of work to get through.
It's a lot, and this is really neat how the conversation is going, because one of my observations from you, to start foundationally, I think writing it down is important. You're someone who doesn't like writing things down, so I bought you a nice notebook and made you write it down. And there would be times where you're like, oh, I wrote this thing down, then I totally forgot about it, and then you would like jump on it and throw some activity or resources at it. So it never goes perfect where you're like, oh, I do all of these things. Because like my last year, like I call it, my theme for the overall year is failure. I have some giant, in a way I would call failures, but at the same time, crazy sort of transformation and renewal. And at the end of the day, a lot of stuff kind of worked out, and I'm in a better position to like, start strong and move in to the next year. But writing things down physically helps. Like it helps our brain. We can go back to them. We can be like, oh, look at this thing I wrote down when I was like all hyped up at this point, and just following those things, or being like, oh, I forgot about this, I meant to do this more, and then you get it in your calendar right away to like start doing those things.
Yeah, a list, or even if you're taking your goals. And I think the biggest thing I've done in the last couple of years still from that's been a benefit to the success of me is project management software. And it doesn't need to be big and expensive and fancy, but I have a goal, or I'm like, okay, I need to do this. I need to accomplish this. And I make the joke, like, if it's not in this project management software, it doesn't exist. Yeah. And I think people can relate to that, because like everyone's like, oh yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that, or I thought about this. It's a fleeting memory, right? It's gone.
We used a tool that's a free tool that Dan Sullivan put out. We downloaded one of his freebies called the Impact Filter. And I think we both used it a little bit, but like in Strategic Coach, they have a saying like, no filter, no project.
Yeah.
So it's like, and managing your ideas, I think as an entrepreneur is like one of the hardest things to do. Like,
sure.
And I think there's also the culture of it's okay to drop ideas. Like you and I have 8 million ideas all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's good and part of the process, but until you make it real, it's just an idea. So, for you, filtering it into the project management software, because you have so much going on, it's like, it's in here, now it's a real thing. Yeah. So it's like, that's how, again, starting strong, hitting those goals is doing that, getting into the game. Because if it's not working, you can also cancel it.
Yeah, I find it very calming, actually, to write it down, or I add it now electronically, for instance, to like project management software or to a document. My mind was racing yesterday afternoon, late afternoon, with a couple different things, and like just out of nowhere, and in a way was frustrating. And I think business owners can appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
Where you're like, it's a Sunday afternoon, I'm trying to like hang out with my kids and do all this, and like I couldn't stay focused on then. I couldn't be present. My mind was just going. So then I started getting on my phone, like writing these notes down. So then you kind of look like absent dad because I'm on my phone, or like I'm trying to like walk around the corner to write these ideas down or whatever. But I also found it very common, because I find it very stressful when you're like, oh, this is a really good idea. I want to keep this idea. And I just thought of something already now that I thought of last night. I was like, oh, that was a good idea. I hope I write this down. No, I did. Anyways, I find it stressful when you have an idea and you don't write it down, because you're like, how are you going to remember that? You're not going to remember that. And that's stressful. Like, it's calming to write those ideas down, like, and plan accordingly.
I have notebooks like kind of all over my house, and just will write stuff down. I used to not. Now I do a bit more. And then maybe twice a year, I'll kind of round them up and kind of go through them. And like, I found gold. I'm like, oh, yeah, I totally forgot about this. Like, and I write it down, or it's also fascinating. Yeah, look at old goals and be like, oh, this turned into this, and like now I'm here. So, the biggest thing to starting strong, I think, is when it's just writing it down and not overthinking it. I think it's nice to have milestones or like know what the moving pieces are to meet it. But you could just write down, like, I want to make $1 million this year. And like
$1 million, why not 10 million?
Why not? Because I'm weak. So like,
why not 100 million?
Why not? Right? And again, writing it down and challenging yourself like that. It's like, if I want to make 100 million and I'm going to go all out, like then I need to put maybe a few more like bits and pieces together of like, how is that even possible? Like to start strong, right? But the top step is just picking those goals. I'll loop in some Donald Miller content in Business Made Simple. We look at trying to form your business around 3 economic priorities, not 5 pages of goals or 8,000 things. Because I think there's some people that encourage you to create like too many goals, and then they encourage you to start like strong out of the gate where you're just hustling like every day, all day. And that's not what we're talking about either. But the alternative isn't nothing, right? It's like, think of 3, and you might not even need 3. Like,
I remember one time using a structure or a process. I won't get too much detail, but it was, you had to have 3 goals, and then each goal had to have like 3 milestones or benefits, and it was like every goal ended up having like 3, 6, 9, like 12, 14 different.
It's like you break it down a million ways.
So dumb. And then those are destined to fail. It's so much work.
Yeah.
So like like you said, like write it down for people. So thinking of most business owners are kind of scattered and they're running around, and like just writing them down is a great idea. I always think about milestones because like I think my brain does think about logistics and processes really well. I do think I'm really good at that. Okay, here's what we have to do. Someone will come to me with an idea, and I've like already kind of planned it out. And unfortunately, I've thought of the problems right away.
Yeah.
Right. Not like it's not going to work, but like logistically, I can piece together how we get there really quickly. So that's why I go to that place of like, okay, if those are the goals, like how do I get there? So I can like put together like the milestones and plans along the way. But if you're a business owner that like maybe that's not your skill set or something that you're not great at, just writing it down. So like I've got 3 goals written down, and they're not even really goals. I guess they're more ideas. It's taking like the Dan Sullivan framework you were talking about. So it's not even a goal, but it's just a revenue generating activity.
Yeah.
To me, that means if I'm not doing something that's revenue generating activity, I need to stop doing it.
Yeah.
I need somebody else to do it. And that's like the hardest
That's a goal
thing
too,
to do.
because so that's what's neat too. Again, we're talking about starting strong, but thinking about, how do you want to spend your time? So if it's like my goal this year is to not mess around too much, or you're established more now. So Matt E.G. Digital is, I forget how many years old.
4 years on February 1st, 2023.
So when you're starting out a business, there's going to be 3 or 4 years where you are just a little bit more chaos. You're trying things. That's okay. I think a lot of people, this is another conversation for another time, put so much stress into trying to get it right first that they mix up on a lot of stuff. So you're going to burn a lot of time. You're going to fiddle around with things that don't work, aren't profitable. By the time you're at the 4-year mark pretty much, where now you can focus more, or what are the activities you need to be doing. And so you can set a goal like not burning as much time on things that don't.
Yeah.
So now you can have that filter of, okay, if I catch myself doing this, either I cancel it or I delegate it, right? Because your prime money-making activities and what they are. So you could have a goal where maybe your goal isn't even like, hey, I want $1 million. It's, I want to spend this much time doing these primary things. And now you have the confidence to know that, the money goal will take care of itself.
Yeah.
If you're focusing on what's making you the most money.
That's a good point.
That's another way to start strong too, is like just containing yourself in those boundaries.
Yeah. And it is funny. You do think so often that goals are monetary and okay, I want to make X amount of revenue, but sometimes it's just like, how do I get out of the weeds?
Yeah.
And like, will I ever be out of the weeds? It feels like you're in the weeds all the time, but if you actually think about it right now and you've been actively working towards it, like I have been, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as it was 2 years ago.
Even mean different things to different people. One of my observations, and I get why I tell people to work with you, you're not stuck in the weeds as much. You don't have, you're never pulling an all-nighter to meet a deadline. Like I've talked to lots of people in marketing, and sometimes the whole thing they talk about is like, oh, we got our, caffeine drinks and we're, got to pull an all-nighter to meet this deadline. And as a client, that makes me panic.
I hate that.
And you don't do that. It's like,
no.
Some people, I think, get frustrated if they don't think you're panicking, or they want you to do everything all at once in the first 2 weeks you know them. But as a system of things repeating, it's like, yes, you may have little mistakes here and there, but you're not rushing to complete something. It's like, oh, maybe we hit the wrong thing on the scheduling. So then you just go change it and it happens, versus uh-oh, we forgot to do that. Let's do a month of work in the next 20 minutes because some businesses run on that all the time. And you're always going to feel like you're in the weeds managing stuff, but make it not panicked in the weeds.
True. I think about how often I talk to people on the team, like contractors and freelancers. And when I first started with Kristen, 3.5 years ago, we were texting each other every day, multiple times a day. She'd be like, what is this? What are we doing? When's it due? When's that due again? And constantly. And then I introduced project management software, Trello, which is good, I guess. It didn't work for me, but it's very well
really
known. Yeah.
It's a great tool for what it's good at. So it's finding the right tool sometimes is
we outgrew it very fast. And then we moved to Asana, and then we joked. We stopped talking to each other. And she texted me the other day, even it was what's new with you? We never talk anymore, but there's a constant flow of work being done by both of us, and both of us pushing this stuff along. And it's just fascinating to think about. Like you said, am I in the weeds? Yeah, but if you actually think back and where you've come from, if that was a goal, you'll get there. If you're actively thinking about these things, and maybe this is going to veer off into mindset conversation and all that stuff, but I think if you're a business owner that is actively thinking about how to improve, and not just how do I make more money, how do I make ends meet today, how do I actually improve holistically? How do I improve my marketing? How do I improve my processes? How do I find better people? Then I think you're going to get there. The revenue will kind of work itself out. And I've found that this year, where it's been really tough professionally, financially, with the opening of a massive investment, and focused a lot of energy on managing digital marketing, and literally focused attention on better work, better processes, better planning, which is honestly paying dividends now from that perspective of not thinking about okay, we need to make up this gap financially. It's more of how do we just do better work? And focusing on that. And it's worked out long term with a couple new big accounts that aren't going anywhere. Another company that's frankly somewhat hired me in a way, and they're not going anywhere. just because I provide good quality work, and like focusing on that, not just like, okay, how do I hustle and scramble? And I did hustle and scramble in the summer, like June, July, August, July mostly.
Sometimes there's hustle seasons, right?
It was sales season, and like we got there, and then there was like a dip, and now like it's okay, and it's still tough, but focusing on like those core values of like, okay, I'm not going to just piece this together and do some lousy work to make ends meet and beg for money. I'm still going to do things the way that they're going to work out long term with.
Yeah, and I think I didn't really intend this when I talked starting strong, but if we think about the word strong, doesn't mean fast necessarily.
Sure.
It really means strong. And sometimes, strong is being slow and steady, standing your ground, so it's doing what you need to do to start strong, not necessarily like fast. So instead of being like, yeah, here's the 8,000 things I need to do tomorrow. And, a lot of people are like, oh, it's the new year. I'm going to start hustling. And they just blast out, doing everything. But if it doesn't have a strong foundation, that's not really starting strong.
You know what I just thought about was, I think going into this year, my goal weight for deadlifts was 250 pounds. And maybe one day I will listen back on this episode and laugh, because that's way less than I used to be able to do. Or there's probably people laughing now like that's not a lot. But my goal going into this year was 250 pounds. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. This year's been really tough for me to string together consistency of going to the gym. I hit that today. I wasn't even like really, I didn't think about that until right now. I hit 255 today.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And I haven't done like heavy deadlifts in a couple months. And I like went into the day, because I don't love going to the gym on Monday mornings anymore, because I find I want to stay up a little bit later on Sunday. I'm not ready to go to bed, but like I cherry picked this workout in a positive way.
Yeah.
And it was just like a whole day of doing deadlifts, and I'm like, sweet, I'm going to that. And I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. It's going to be really heavy. I got to 255, and like that was, hey, I want to do this, and slowly build it towards it.
Yeah.
The whole time. I wasn't going to be able to start January 1st of last year and just like try to lift 250. I think in February or March, I got to 225 during that open workout and I had never lifted that before. I've never like lifted 200 pounds, I don't think, before.
It's really cool. There's a lot of analogies between, I think, fitness and business and how to get to a goal. Because I think, a thing I think about all the time, and we both work out with Carbon Heights and Kansas, and I think the programming there is really good, and you kind of like get surprised by goals, because it's not like, oh, hey, I want to lift 250 pounds. I'm just going to every week, add a pound to it, or like keep doing it and keep practicing it. It's like you do other things that contribute to that strength. So then you come back to that and you're like, oh, now suddenly I'm stronger and I can do more.
Yeah.
I think business is kind of the same. Like, January 1st, you write down your number.
Yeah.
And like, it's not easy to necessarily get there. And there's all sorts of different activities that sort of make you better to be able to get there. Or, you start with like just a random goal you're throwing out there.
True.
And then you might get there. But now you're in a stronger position to be able to make sort of better sort of goals.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't even max out. I could have done more. It was my first time using tape on my thumbs.
Oh,
have you ever done that?
Only recently, and it's like life-changing.
It was huge.
I realized that my delicate skin on my thumbs is like what's holding me back.
I think a couple months ago, back in the summer, we're building towards this, and it was the one that's actually in the app showing the previous one, where my hands were slipping, and then someone's like, it's your thumbs, or your thumbs are weak. So I put chalk on for the first time, and it was super beneficial, but it like still slipped. But this, like with the tape and the chalk today, I was like, I still got more in me. Now my goal, I'll say it out loud now, is like, I'm going to hit 300 pounds next year,
awesome,
which I'll be pretty excited about. And like, there's no way I will try that tomorrow or next week, but I bet you a year from now talking, it'll be like, oh yeah, I want to hit 300 pounds and I did it, which I think is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. Same with business. So
Yeah.
start out strong, show up regularly.
Yes.
Is kind of like a thing that, that helps you do that. So it's similar in business. And I think starting strong, I'm going to steal the final thought for today is know that it's not hustle. It's not punishing yourself. It's really thinking about your business. Writing things down is important, and, creating those goals, and just don't let it slip away to, next month or you just, get in there and, start strong, and you're going to have a great year. So if you want to talk more about your upcoming year, we'd love to do that. We'd love to have you on the show. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, you can reach out to us at setitup@kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca.